are from one of the 7 designated countries, or for those of you who are from a country that could potentially be designated in the future, right? Because we also know that the order says that there are going to be requirements of every single country to comply with certain documentation verification requirements. And if those countries comply to the satisfaction of the administration, then they will not be designated. But if they do not comply to the administration's satisfaction, they may be named. A lot of people from Pakistan and Bangladesh have asked, do you think that our countries will be designated? I don't know, and it's very hard to know. But generally speaking, if you are a green card holder or an immigrant or a non-immigrant visa holder, contact an attorney before traveling and sign a G28 before you leave.
What's a G28?
A G28 again.
I actually know the answer to that question. I'm just trying to.
This is why you can't trust Sunny. Boy, Sunny, that's a pretty basic question. I'm crossing you off my referral list. A G28 again is the form that you sign that gives an attorney permission to represent you. And when CBP is presented with the G28, they are aware that the attorney is authorized to represent your interests. Sign a G28 with an immigration attorney. I'm going to also say this. When you are going for consultation about immigration matters, work with an attorney who practices only immigration law, because it's Byzantine law, it's very confusing, and you need somebody who's going to be completely up to date. There are some initiatives with pro bono attorneys, but I counsel you to choose attorneys who have expertise in immigration law and that aren't just sort of learning it by the seat of their pants at this time when the law is so complicated and always changing. Do not sign any forms without first reviewing with an attorney. For example, if you're presented with an I-407, which is that voluntary revocation of your lawful permanent residence, it is very easy to be intimidated when you're being inspected at the airport. How many people here, just by show of hands, have gone through quote-unquote secondary inspection, right? Tons of people. We go through secondary inspection. I look forward to secondary inspection on my next trip out of the country, because it'll be the first time we're doing it with my kids, so I look forward to subjecting CBP to my children. That will be my revenge. But it is very, very intimidating, but I'm going to give you some sort of tips, I guess, a few more tips. I wanted to talk a little bit about what was happening at the DFW airport. Right now, people who are arriving on international arrivals from DFW, there's been talk about habeas petitions. Habeas in Latin means, habeas corpus means produce the body. It's when somebody is being unlawfully detained, you file a habeas corpus. Those were the lawsuits that were happening around the country that eventually those temporary restraining orders are going to be mooted out when people are released. That's why the Seattle lawsuit is so important, because the state has standing, and it's the state that is bringing this lawsuit. So in DFW, we are not filing habeas corpus petitions right now, and that is because we are in a circuit that is hostile to, I would say, positive decisions in favor of immigrants. And so most of the advocacy that happens at the DFW airport for people who are being unnecessarily detained is the application of these existing orders in other parts of the country that apply nationally. Okay, so right now at the DFW airport, our understanding is people are being subjected to sort of an extensive secondary inspection, but nobody is actually being detained anymore. For now, talk to me in a couple hours, we'll see what changes.
All right, so what if you're a US citizen? What rights do you have at the border? Well, the first right that you have that's very important is that you have a right to an attorney, and that's particularly important to US citizens. Okay? So at any point in time when you invoke the right to an attorney, questioning has to stop, and you get an opportunity to speak to your attorney, and your attorney gets the right to be present at all questioning. Further, you have the right to remain silent. We've all heard about that, but that's really important. Failure or refusal to answer questions cannot be used against you in a court of law. So simply stating that I don't want to answer these questions until my attorney is present, that's perfectly fine, and that's what you should be encouraged to do. Now, what if you're a dual national? What if you're a national of the United States and you also happen to be a national of one of the other 7 countries? You should present your US passport, okay? Now, they may be asking you whether or not you also travel with your other passport, and at that point in time, you should, of course, answer truthfully and present your other passport, but you should first present your U.S. passport. As a U.S. citizen, you're expected to travel only with your U.S. passport. Now, an important thing to understand is that your citizenship cannot be revoked. You cannot be denaturalized absent some sort of judicial determination. So it's only a judge who can actually denaturalize you, and only in certain situations can you be denaturalized. So, for example, if you join a foreign army, or if you or if you lied on your naturalization examination and you obtain naturalization by fraud, or if you willingly give up your U.S. citizenship. But absent some sort of judicial determination, your citizenship cannot be taken away from you. So just because you don't have a valid passport doesn't mean that you're no longer a citizen. You can still get a passport, and that will prove your U.S. citizenship. So, Sela was talking about being detained and habeas. Yeah, you were going to say something?
I want to go back to your thing about citizenship cannot be revoked absent a judicial determination. One of the ways that the government sometimes tries to circumvent that is when a U.S. citizen is abroad and tries to renew their passport by simply failing to adjudicate their passport application.
Yeah.
So that is just something in this current climate to be aware of, to make sure that if you're renewing your passport, renew it while you're here.
Right. Now, what if you're in inspection and you don't know if you're being detained? Well, the first thing you should do is you should ask the Customs and Border Protection officer, am I being detained? That's the first thing you should do. And if the Customs and Border Protection officer says that you are being detained, at that point, you do have a right to an attorney. If the Customs and Border Protection officer will not answer you as to whether or not you're being detained, at that point, you can ask for what's called a notice to appear, also known as an NTA. That's the charging instrument. That's what allows an immigration judge to review your case. So if you ask for a notice to appear, and they give you a notice to appear, that's what allows you to advance your case before an immigration judge. If your permanent residency card is confiscated, you have the right to ask for proof that you are a permanent resident. So they'll give you something like an I-94, which says that, yes, you're a permanent resident. And we talked about habeas petitions as well. That's where a federal district judge can remedy the unlawful deprivation of liberty by government officials. So if you're being detained and you want to be released, one way to effectuate that is by filing a habeas petition. All right, so what are my rights when driving across the U.S. border? The first thing to know is that it is illegal for law enforcement to perform stops based on race, nationality, religion, sex, or ethnicity. In order for law enforcement or CBP to stop you and to actually check your vehicle, they have to have what's called probable cause. And what that means is that if they have a belief that some sort of crime has been committed, then and only then can they actually check the interior of your vehicle. But they can conduct searches that are safe, secure, humane, dignified, and professional. Like I said, they cannot check the inside of your car without probable cause, and that includes your trunk. However, a CBP officer can visually inspect the outside of your car. Like, I don't know if you guys have driven across the border, but you've probably seen that there are dogs that sniff for drugs, and that's perfectly legal. They can do that, and a CBP officer can just visually inspect your car and walk around it, but they cannot actually go inside your car without probable cause or without your consent, and you do not have to provide consent.
Okay, so this is a question that comes up a lot, and so I kind of feel like we have a good news, bad news situation here. The bad news is there's this ban. The good news, it's temporarily suspended. The bad news is this religious profiling at the airport is not new. The good news is we're coming up with better strategies to deal with it. So when you are traveling with your phone and you're entering at the border, normally, because we don't live in a police state yet, you cannot simply be subjected to search and seizure because the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution protects you from being stopped and searched unless there's a reasonable suspicion to believe that you may be engaged in some kind of unlawful activity. At the border, the Fourth Amendment does not protect you in that manner. And the courts have recognized that the border presents a very unique situation where there is wide-reaching authority for CBP to search your person and your belongings. So how many people here have a cell phone? This is how I'm gauging whether audience participation is being honest with me. Everybody here has a cell phone. And how many of you have personal pictures on your cell phone? Everybody, right? What about a Facebook app? Okay, some unexpected hands, actually. So we are all engaged in some kind of connectivity with other people through these cell phones. These are our computers. These have details about our personal lives. When you are entering through a port of entry and CBP says, you need to give me your phone, or I want to see your phone, they're allowed to do that. And they're allowed to search your phone, and they're allowed to ask you for your password for your phone. And it doesn't matter whether they think you've done anything wrong. And I will tell you that I have a client who was placed in removal proceedings because there was a racist CBP officer who just didn't like the look of him, picked up his phone, and how many people here have WhatsApp? Okay, and how many of you are on a group, like a WhatsApp group where there are like 1 million messages and people send videos and photographs and things like that? And I don't know if you know, but unless you opt out on WhatsApp, all the media gets downloaded directly to your camera roll. And so there were videos that were simply Islamic in nature, a scholar preaching, a politician speaking, and based on that, that CBP officer wrote up a charging document and charged the client with being deportable for failing to comply with terms of his visa. It was a pretext, right? But by raising the specter of national security based on constitutionally protected speech and freedom of religion, he still managed to infringe on the client's rights. So you have to be aware that everything on your phone will be fair game. So here's my practical advice to you. And I'm going on an international trip soon, inshallah, and I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to back up all my content digitally. Okay, everything that's on my phone, all the pictures, all the emails, everything. I have an Apple iPhone, so I'm going to back it up to the iCloud, and then I'm going to reset it to factory default. So it has literally nothing on it. I'm going to put in Sunny's number in case we get stuck in secondary inspection, and I have everybody else's numbers memorized. So that's what I recommend that you do, because they can't, without reasonable suspicion, ask you for your passwords to your accounts. I mean, perhaps they can, but I don't think that the law would be on their side.
No,
if you do not voluntarily provide it, they may subject you to a longer secondary inspection. And people have asked me, they said, wouldn't it look really weird if I have a phone and there's nothing in it? And I was thinking to myself, think of any profession that you're in, whether it's a business, whether it's medicine, whether it's law, whether it's even the arts. You're going to have certain communications that are confidential that should be protected. And you are jeopardizing the confidentiality of those communications every time you cross through a port of entry. So it is completely prudent and reasonable to protect your personal data. There was a journalist, actually, who was a Canadian award-winning journalist who had confidential source information on his personal media and was subjected to, all of that was compromised during a CBP search, and that case was taken up by the ACLU. So scrub your contents, your devices clean. Me personally, if I were you, I would deactivate your social media accounts. I mean, it's really easy to do. On Instagram, you can just set yourself to private. Facebook, you can just deactivate and reactivate later. Because again, we have seen before this ban is a manifestation of an anti-Muslim bias that has been rampant in the field of immigration and enforcement. And things that are protected speech, if they're a little too Muslim-y, a little too scary, the beard's a little too big, or the hijab's a little too, I don't know, hijabi, there will be CBP officers that will discriminate against you on that basis. And finally, answer all questions truthfully. I cannot reinforce this enough. Every time you speak to an inspecting officer, your statements are going to be part of your record. And I know that because then we do Freedom of Information Act requests and we get to see inspection record, the person said this, that, does it square with their immigration application on this day or that day. That being said, we also have information, which I think this is a new development, that people are essentially being given ideological tests. Upon their presentation at the port of entry, they're being asked, what do you think about Donald Trump? what do you think about the government of the United States? And I encourage you to answer truthfully, but you can also, find something nice to say. Melania has great hair.
She does. It's true.
Barron is very well dressed, and basically I'm out of ideas, but you get the idea. So, but it's of paramount importance that you answer questions truthfully. So now Sunny's going to talk about people whose immigration cases are pending if you're a national of one of the 7 countries. And again, this has another backstory. This has been flipping and flopping, and now here's the current state of the law.
So, this is a question that I get a lot. What if you have an immigration case that you filed and you happen to be a national of one of the 7 countries? What's going to happen to that case? Is it going to go pending forever? Will it finally get adjudicated? So here's what you need to know. First of all, as you know, the Washington court case put a stay on the executive order. So the cases should continue as they were previously processing. Now, what do you do in situations in which your case has been pending for an unreasonable amount of time? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to contact USCIS and issue what's called a service request. Okay, so you can call USCIS, or you can file those online. They have a portal through the USCIS website. The other thing you can do is you can schedule an InfoPass appointment, and that you can schedule through the USCIS website, which allows you to speak to an immigration officer at the local district office. It's really important that when you make these inquiries on behalf of your case that's been pending for an unreasonable amount of time, that you keep a record of all of the efforts that you've made, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. The other thing that you need to do also is contact your local congressman. Your local congress can make a special inquiry on behalf of you on your case, and they can put gentle pressure on USCIS to try and for there to be an outcome on your case. And finally, if your case has been pending for an unreasonable amount of time and you've exhausted all other administrative remedies that I've talked about today, you can file what's called a writ of mandamus, which is basically a lawsuit compelling the U.S. government to make a decision in your case. And actually, Sel, I think you and your team, you guys do a lot of these writs at CLCMA.
Right. Well, actually, so we'll get into this a little bit later. We're actually not doing mandamus so much as we're trying to attack what we believe is the cause of these delayed adjudications that are indefinite in nature.
Yeah. So what if you, let's say that the ban was in place again. What if, for example, you're a citizen of one of the 7 countries and a citizen of another country? So for example, I'm a citizen of Somalia, but I'm also a citizen of the UK. Does the ban apply to you? Yes, the ban does apply to you. What if you're a citizen of the United States, but you were previously a citizen of Syria? Does the ban apply to you? No, the ban does not apply to you, and you're allowed to be admitted into the United States. What if you're a permanent resident of the United States, but you happen to have previously traveled to one of those 7 countries? For example, there's a visa stamp in your passport that reflects that you've actually traveled to one of those 7 countries. Does the ban apply to you? No, the ban does not apply to you, but you can be expected, you can anticipate that you'll be receiving extensive questioning at the port of entry about your travel to those countries. Because the Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection, they do have a right to ask you questions that are reasonably related to your travel, where you went, who you talked to, who you gave money to, that kind of stuff.
Just to clarify, for question 1, if you're a citizen of both the UK and Somalia and you want to enter the United States, what do you do? Well,
you present your U.S. passport first.
Your UK passport?
UK passport, right.
Okay, great.
Yeah. All right, so this is another question that I get quite a bit. Will the travel ban be extended to other countries? So the Department of State did issue a memo, and what they said is that they do not have any intention of extending the number of countries. It's going to be, as of now, it's going to be limited to those specific 7 countries. But as we know, the Trump administration could add another executive order and expand that list at any point in time, but as of today, the Department of State has said there is no intention, but the Trump administration doesn't really communicate with other agencies, so we never know. I think, as Sela said, I think it's prudent and important that until the dust settles, it's probably not a good idea to travel internationally. If you can avoid travel internationally at this point, it's probably the wise thing to do. Okay, so what about this Muslim registry we've been hearing about?
So yeah, we've heard a lot of people talking about a Muslim registry, and that's some pretty scary stuff. And we've seen a lot of heartening statements from people outside the Muslim community who are saying that if there's a Muslim registry, I'll register myself. And that is a wonderful expression of solidarity, but that is not how it's going to happen. So the way it's going to happen, if it does happen, is already set in motion, and that is as a national security question. Everything is going to be under the guise of national security. So the terrorist screening database operates like a Muslim registry, okay? If you have ever had 4 S's on your boarding pass, guess what? You're on the terrorist screening database. If you are continuously subjected to secondary screening at an airport, you're on the terrorist screening database. If you've ever tried to buy a gun in New Jersey and been rejected and it hasn't been explained to you why, you are on the terrorist screening database. It is like the approach for the terrorist screening database is so ineffective because when you're searching for a needle in a haystack, the terrorist watch list treats every piece of hay like a needle, right? So everyone is a threat, so no one is a threat. And so it does not make us safer. Muslims are no less invested in not being a victim of a random attack than anybody else. But the way you get nominated to the terrorist screening database is individuals from different agencies, agents from different agencies can nominate you to the database, and it's secret, and it's managed by an agency that's kind of part of the FBI, but also slightly separate. And there's no way for you to find out, hey, why am I on the terrorist database? Maybe my name is the same as somebody else's. Let me just tell people this is a mistake. You will not get a confirmation whether you are or are not. I believe there is case law now that if you submit a request through DHS, which has no control over the terrorist database, that you can potentially find out whether you are or are not on the no-fly list, but you cannot find out if you are on actually the terrorist screening database. So the groundwork has already been set. Everyone who's on the terrorist screening database is presumed guilty until proven innocent, but they don't know that they're being presumed guilty, so they don't know how to prove themselves innocent. So after 9/11, there was a program called NSEERS, which was the National Security Entry-Exit Registration System. NSEERS, I believe Pakistan was one of the countries that was designated in NSEERS, and basically what happened was under the Obama administration, all of the countries were de-designated, I believe, and so it was kind of just a shell. It was an administrative law shell. And then before President Obama left office, he actually, by executive order, abolished the program in its entirety. But President Trump may want to bring it back. It would be a terrible idea because NSEERS required foreign nationals from these countries to register as if they were on criminal probation. So people were forced to register. People who had discrepancies in their applications were picked apart, deported, families were separated. And I want everyone here to take a wild guess. How many leads do you think that they got for a single act of terrorism? 0. Absolutely 0. So the program was actually analyzed by the Office of the Inspector General and was panned for being ineffective, onerous, and expensive and useless. But essentially what we're dealing with is the impact of the terrorist screening database is far and wide. It's not just travel. It's not just gun purchase. It's immigration. If you are on the TSDB and you have applied to naturalize, your application cannot be approved by your USCIS field office. They will delay and delay and delay and delay, and they are instructed to find a pretext to deny you. And this is a secret policy called CARP, Controlled Application Review and Resolution Policy. It was promulgated in 2008. It was revealed in litigation by the ACLU in 2011. So what we have seen with people who are being CARPed is that they are very vulnerable. And when they're very vulnerable and they're seeking to do anything to make their status lawful as a citizen, guess who comes to their house to tell them that they can help them? The FBI. The FBI comes and the FBI says, look, you know, I'm just doing a background check on your naturalization application. I'm here to help you. We just need to clear up a few facts, you know. Do you know this person? Do you know that person? Let me show you a photo array. And they'll build a relationship with you and they will gain your trust. And when they take you out for dinner or they take you out for lunch or they buy a gift for your child who's in the hospital, they're expensing it to the account. They're expensing it to the FBI because they're cultivating you to be an informant. So when the FBI comes to talk to you, they're not there to help you. They're there to investigate you, okay? So they're actually legally allowed to lie to you. So there are cases that say, hey, you know, this was a completely unfair prosecution, the FBI lied to me, too bad. They're allowed to engage in subversive tactics as part of their investigation. So if somebody is legally allowed to lie to you, is probably investigating you because you're not eligible for relief anyway and they're looking for an excuse to deny you, it is not in your interest to talk to them. So you say, thank you so much for coming. You know, you can hold off, don't bring them into the house, close the door behind you, say thank you so much for coming. I'd love to talk to you. Let me take your card and my attorney is going to give you a call and we'll follow up ASAP. Thank you so much for coming. That's it. You say nothing else. Because if you do, again, you are making statements that are going to be on the record. And let's say, for example, they ask you, oh, you worked here in 1999? Oh, okay, And then you have an application where you wrote that you worked there in 1998. If they're looking for an excuse to deny you on an immigration application, they will say, well, you materially misrepresented, a material fact. So when someone from the FBI comes to you and says, I'm just doing a background check and if you work with me, I'll just, you know, sort your immigration stuff out for you, that's actually against their own policy. They're not allowed to make promises related to immigration because the Department of Justice is not the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Homeland Security administers immigration benefits and immigration enforcement. And when you're thinking, oh, this guy's a nice guy, she's a nice girl. I mean, I see her at the Masjid, she comes, she does outreach, you know, they're there for us when there are hate crimes. Remember who their boss is. Their boss is Donald J. Trump. Their boss gets his advice from Steve Bannon. And what is his name? Michael Flynn. So you need to remember who their boss is. They may be congenial and they may actually be lovely people, but it is not their job to help you. It is your job to protect yourself. So when the FBI comes knocking, give us a call, go to our website. If we can't be there, we will work with all of our partners. We have great partners in the DFW area, and we will have somebody accompany you. But you are very vulnerable when you have a pending immigration application, and you're being interviewed by the FBI because you're already, if you're on the TSDB, you're already basically likely going to be denied. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, and Sunny, I don't know if you want to add to any of what I'm saying about this, is we've talked a lot about the so-called, well, it is really a Muslim ban, but it's not really operating as a ban right now, as making Muslims very vulnerable in immigration. But what I want to talk to you about is the other executive order that I think is incorrectly presumed to apply mostly to the Latino population in the United States. And I want you to be aware of it because it's going to apply to a lot of people in our community. There's an incorrect presumption that there aren't that many undocumented people or people who are without immigration status in the Muslim community, and there are actually tons. And so the other executive order that Donald Trump promulgated basically announces enforcement priorities that have the effect of making every single undocumented immigrant in the United States a priority for removal, okay? They punish jurisdictions that are so-called sanctuary jurisdictions, which are jurisdictions that are refusing to assist the federal government in their job of enforcing immigration law. They don't define sanctuary jurisdictions, and really the legal challenges to this part of the order are going to be very strong because you cannot compel local agencies to do the federal government's work. They're going to increase immigration prosecutions, and that is just sort of a ridiculous thing because I don't know if you know this, but immigration-related criminal prosecutions are more than half of the total federal court docket, more than federal prosecutions for drugs, firearms, and fraud combined, okay? So we are wasting a huge amount of resources, and clearly it's not working. The executive order will also revive a program called Secure Communities, and Secure Communities requires local law enforcement to share information with DHS about persons in their custody, and authorizes DHS as a blanket rule to issue detainers. And the problem with secure communities is when you're saying, well, we don't have a reason to hold this person criminally, but we'll just keep holding on to you for a little while longer because ICE asked us to, you're violating that person's constitutional right to liberty. Finally, it encourages the expansion of the 287G program. And is there anybody here from Tarrant County? I know Tarrant County is really far away. Tarrant County is applying to be part of this 287G program, which is an awful program. This program was reduced significantly under the Obama administration because it did not have the effect of making the community safer. Basically, it deputizes local police officers to enforce immigration law. And you can think for very obvious reasons why that would be a bad thing. Police officers are entrusted with maintaining public safety. If you are afraid to call the police because you have vulnerable immigration status or you may be out of immigration status, your community is not going to be safer. Everyone is going to be more endangered by it. So, I want everyone here to leave feeling like they've had some education about the Muslim ban, but I also want you to be aware, for those of you who have immigrants in your family, who have undocumented people in your family, and in your circle of friends, that this is very serious as well.
Yeah, I mean, it creates a chilling effect. I mean, the local law enforcement relies on the people that it protects to provide them information about crimes. That's an important part of law enforcement. And if the people that they protect don't trust them, it makes their job even harder.
Yeah. And I think we're about to take questions, but one thing that I wanted to add was, at CLCMA, we're very lucky. We work with a lot of different community partners, and I want to recognize and appreciate the contributions that all of our community partners have made. If you have questions, you can come to us. We're waiting for the ACLU Texas to set up a statewide or a North Texas hotline so that people can call at any time. We do not have a 24-hour hotline. We do have our phone number during business hours, and you can apply for help online at any time. We work closely with lawyers from Texas A&M Law School, the lawyer at CARE DFW, the lawyers at ACLU Texas. This is really a collective effort, and I want to acknowledge the help and support that we're getting from really everywhere. So what we're trying to do collectively as a community of lawyers and a community of immigration lawyers is making sure that everyone who has a legal question will get an answer, and everyone who has a legal need will get representation. So.
Okay, well, I guess we can start with any questions. Oh, okay, all right. So, all right, you want to start with the sisters? All right, great. So, okay, the sister in the front.
What if you were born in one of the banned 7 countries, but you are a green card holder here?
Okay.
What happens when you're traveling?
Okay, so basically Department of Homeland Security has said that permanent residents should be admitted, and it's a matter of national interest, and that's specifically defined in the executive order. So even if you're a citizen or you were born in one of those 7 countries, but if you have permanent residency in the United States, you should be admitted back into the United States. And that was even before yesterday's ruling from Washington, the federal district court in Washington.
Right.
Even before that. So
And then subsequent to that, they said that all LPRs, all green card holders, will be processed according to standard policies and procedures.
correct. So you should, I mean,
Oh, and the White House Office of Legal Counsel said specifically, because I don't think anybody asked the White House's lawyers about this order before they promulgated it. So the White House Office of Legal Counsel also said that it is their opinion that the order does not encompass lawful permanent residence.
yeah, and there was some confusion about this initially when the order first came out. CBP wasn't sure what to do, and that just has to do with the fact that the Trump administration didn't go through that with Department of Homeland Security, Department of State, Department of Justice, and the entire order itself was written very sloppily. So, but I hope that's responsive.
Yeah. There was another question in the back, all the way in the back row.
Back? Okay.
I have an application for a work visa and OPT extension this 1st of April, and I'm from one of the 7 banned countries, so I don't know if it affects the application process or if it's not, or what should I do in this case?
Do you want to answer that?
Sure. Yeah, so your OPT extension, is it a STEM extension? Yeah, okay. So your STEM OPT extension will not be disturbed. It'll continue to process just as it was processing before, despite the fact that you're a citizen of one of the 7 countries. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. STEM OPT extensions actually get approved with regularity. They usually don't take more than 30 to 60 days. And even when you've filed your STEM OPT extension, you can continue to work with your STEM OPT employer even before the approval notice.
And the work visa, the work H1B.
Oh, like H1B, yeah. Same is true for the H1B. The H1B is not affected in any way by your country of birth or by your country of citizenship. The H1B depends only on whether or not the job that's being offered to you is a specialty occupation, and whether or not you have the degree that corresponds to that occupation, and whether the employer can offer you that the specialty occupation work. So it has nothing to do with your country of nationality. Okay. You want to take a want to try a question from the brothers?
I just had a quick question about the lawsuits that's being applied. Is it against Donald Trump or his administration itself, and how is it going to be mandated? What is the follow-up on it?
Okay, so the lawsuit is against the Trump administration and Donald Trump individually. What's going to happen at this point? I think you're talking about the Washington lawsuit. So all the lawsuits. Well, the lawsuits are going to go through the normal course, which is they're probably going to be appealed to higher courts, and I suspect that it's ultimately going to end up, because what's going to happen is that these different federal courts are going to have different decisions. Most of the decisions probably will be in favor or be against Donald Trump, but some of the lawsuits probably may have disparate decisions. So ultimately, in order to allow for uniformity in the decision, I suspect it's going to go up to the Supreme Court. Sela, what do you think?
I happen to agree. I think the strongest case, however, is the cases that are being brought by the actual states, like the state of Washington and the state of Minnesota. I think that the other cases that related to individuals who were denied entry, I think those are more hampered simply by the dearth of constitutional rights that exist for persons seeking to enter as immigrants.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
I had a quick question. My mom, she left for Pakistan. She's a permanent resident from Pakistan because her dad passed away. This was last month. So she plans to stay there for 3 months and then come back because obviously my grandma's alone, et cetera, et cetera. So is that advisable, or do you recommend she just takes the first flight home, or?
So, the Department of State has said that they don't have any intentions of adding any more countries to the executive order. Of course, Pakistan was not listed as one of those countries. So, and there's different geopolitical reasons why I think Pakistan would not be added to that list. But as of right now, it's just a discretionary. It's just going to be discretionary on your mother's part. It would be better to be inside the United States, of course, because you have more constitutional privileges and rights while you're inside the United States. But as of right now, I don't have any knowledge of Pakistan being added to that list.
Also, you mentioned irrespective of the country, permanent resident holders, this ban does not apply.
Exactly, permanent resident doesn't even apply to permanent residents. So even if Pakistan was added to that list, she's a permanent resident, so she would be allowed entry back into the United States.
And just one other question.
Yeah.
I'm a naturalized citizen,
Yeah.
and so is my wife and our kids. So we're planning to go on a vacation. Should we internationally? Should we not go, or does that make a difference if you're a citizen, or you shouldn't?
Makes a big difference if you're a citizen.
Yeah,
And
okay.
I would simply say, in this current environment, people who otherwise would have to suppress a lot of their anti-Muslim bias are feeling very empowered by it. So simply be prepared for secondary inspection that you may not have experienced before. But as a naturalized citizen, there's nothing, there's no additional risk created by this ban. The only risk is essentially created by having an administration that has really brought a lot of some of the sort of worst parts of people to the forefront, I would say.
Yeah, but just because you're a naturalized citizen, that doesn't mean that your citizenship is any less than a citizen who was born in the United States.
Yeah.
So your passport has the same legal effect as any other U.S. passport.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Hey, welcome.
Quick question. In this hypothetical scenario, you're a U.S. citizen and you want to go on Umrah and perhaps visit one of the countries, let's say Egypt, while you're on Umrah. I guess is it the same question as the gentleman before, or should you just be prepared for further secondary screening, like upon return, because you're visiting one of the countries that were on the banned list, if you will? Or would you just advise against an itinerary that includes, or do you advise against maybe going on against Umrah or Hajj in the near term?
So Egypt's not on the list. So it's Iran, Iraq, Syria, Sudan, Yemen, Libya, and Somalia. And if you are a citizen, I do not believe that there is any restriction on your right to travel. I believe that you face an additional risk, again, of if you visit one of the banned countries, additional questioning, but as a citizen, that questioning necessarily has to be closely related to simply determining whether you are who you say you are, your identity, and your admissibility as a citizen. Beyond that, there needs to be a reasonable suspicion that you're engaged in some kind of unlawful activity. And again, like what I advise everybody to do is to really be aggressive about protecting your own rights and be aware of what your rights at the border are. And when if you're in secondary inspection and things are getting handed, be prepared to invoke your right to an attorney. Be prepared to write down the questions that are being asked of you. This practice is not going to be challenged simply in the courts, but by people actually invoking their rights as citizens. But I don't believe that this ban creates any additional risk factors for U.S. citizens traveling.
Yeah, I would agree.
Just to follow up to that,
Yeah.
since I've been asked that many times as a mosque leader, people planning for Hajj, it's a lot of investment, it's a big investment, and these countries, I mean, it's about 6-7 months away, but people are still planning to do it right now. So what should they be aware of? Should they halt their plans? Should they keep going with their plans?
For now, for anyone who is not a U.S. citizen, who is a national of one of the designated countries, I would advise against travel, even for lawful permanent residents, because we don't know how things are going to shake out. We literally are taking screenshots of the government's websites to know what they're saying at what time, because it's changing constantly. That's my position. What would you say, Sunny?
I mean, the situation is very fluid, and like Stella said, it's constantly changing by the hour. So my suggestion, if you're not a U.S. citizen, let's wait for the dust to settle. Let's see how things shake out. And in an abundance of caution, I would encourage non-U.S. citizens not to travel internationally, if they can. If they do, it's at their own discretion.
So as a U.S. citizen, if you are pulled aside for a secondary, investigation, questioning, etc., do you refuse to answer any questions point blank and say all those, I need an attorney, or do you cooperate, and then if you find the interrogation is getting way beyond what you expected, then you stop? What do you recommend?
I think it's a matter of being practical.
Yeah, I mean, it really just depends on what type of questions are being asked to you. If you're a U.S. citizen, CBP should only be trying to verify your U.S. citizenship and to determine whether or not you've committed any sort of crime. Absent any derogatory information that you're not a U.S. citizen, if you've proven that you're a U.S. citizen, the next question is, am I being detained? Okay? Because if you're not being detained, and if you've proven that you're a U.S. citizen and you haven't committed any crimes, then they cannot detain you. They cannot keep you there. and so you should be allowed to enter the United States. So if the questions do not revolve around you being a U.S. citizen, then you need to just ask if you're being detained. Otherwise, they need to let you through.
Sir, my question is that yesterday's orders of Seattle court have the same effects on whole over the country.
That's right. It has a national impact. So it's not just local to Washington or Minnesota. It's a stay across the entire country.
Sir, I'm a permanent resident. Can I travel in the next few days to Pakistan?
Certainly you can travel to Pakistan if you have a Pakistani passport. In terms of your ability to re-enter the United States, Pakistan was not one of those 7 countries, and even if it was, since you're a permanent resident, your entry into the United States would be deemed in the national interest, so you should be allowed admission back to the United States. Okay?
Hi, I had a general question. I've been hearing on social media, and even some of my non-Muslim friends have asked this, where they said at, like when you're getting questioned and pulled aside, they'll ask to see your social media accounts. Will that hold true after what happened yesterday? And if they do, can you still go ahead and just refuse because it doesn't have anything to do with your citizenship?
You want to answer that?
Well, it was happening even before.
Yes, it
right?
was.
I mean, it's been happening
It's
for a
not new.
long time. So,
How would you advise then to do that? Like some people ask me, like, should they delete their social media accounts completely? So when they ask, they say, "Oh, I don't follow, so I don't have any social media that you can look at."
You have to be truthful. You have to say what the truth is. If they say, "Do you have Facebook?" You say, "No, I have a deactivated account." So you can go to my Facebook ID and you're not going to see anything. They have been asking for social media IDs since before this ban. If I were at the border and they asked me for mine, I would refuse, understanding that that might not be a way to endear myself to the agent, but it's irrelevant to the question of whether I'm a U.S. citizen.
yeah, it doesn't have anything to do in terms of your admissibility. It doesn't have anything to do in terms of proving that you're a U.S. citizen. So I think it would be a wise decision to simply not answer those questions.
What if you're not a citizen? Would you recommend the same thing?
Yeah, I think even if you're not a citizen, I would not answer those questions.
Hello, good afternoon. We have a cruise planned in the next couple of weeks, and we're both U.S. citizens. All our kids are U.S. citizens. Can we be secondarily inspected for that trip?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a risk that predated the ban. I think the ban legally does not impact the rights of citizens, period. Let's be really clear. The ban has no effect on the rights of U.S. citizens. Whatever happens in the litigation, however it shakes out, the ban does not impact U.S. citizens. What the environment among enforcement agencies, there has been a change in the environment in enforcement agencies where clear anti-Muslim bias is getting a little bit more of a pass. That's all. So as a citizen, you need to be prepared to answer the questions that are related to your identity and your status as a U.S. citizen. And then after that point, if the questions start asking you about things like your political opinions or religious beliefs, you say no and invoke your right to an attorney. Again, I'll speak from my personal experience. I'm literally filling out a G28 for myself and my husband with Sunny before I travel because I do not intend to comply with requests for information that is irrelevant to whether I'm a citizen.
We're just going to go with the one online question, if you don't mind. The question is, does it help if we apply for global entry?
No.
Okay.
It does not help if you apply for global entry.
Azhar, you just alluded to this thing that since most of your topic was about permanent residents, U.S. citizens, how does it affect dealing with law enforcement when you're not a permanent resident? Could be a visitor, could be, for example, an H-1B. I don't know if he's a permanent resident or not. How do you deal in such scenarios? Dealing with are we having the same rights as a U.S. citizen? And like for our parents who are visiting as, say, on a visitor visa, does that make a difference?
Yeah, it really doesn't make a difference. Whether you're an immigrant, a non-immigrant, or a U.S. citizen, if the FBI comes a knocking, then you need to be just asking for their card and then telling them that your attorney will get in touch with them. It's irrespective of your immigration status, or even if you have no immigration status at all. You would do the same thing that Sela said, which is to take the card, don't offer any information, and then only speak to them in the presence of an attorney.
And I want to add one more thing. In our cases, we have opportunities to review notes that would otherwise not be revealed to the public. And I want you to know that when the FBI comes to your mosque to do community outreach, it's also, that outreach department is under its intelligence collection, okay? So when you speak to FBI agent so-and-so who's come to your event, your iftar is being really congenial, talking to everybody, that FBI agent goes back to his or her office and writes it up. And your name, because you were talking to that individual, will show up in an FBI file related to something maybe entirely unrelated to you. But I talked to Imam so-and-so, was taking the temperature, asking if there's anyone he's concerned about. So you need to be aware that it's not just when they knock at your door, it's whenever they have contact with you. And I know this because I see this in a document that otherwise cannot be revealed to the public for criminal procedure reasons. But you need to be aware that the FBI's outreach is intimately tied to its intelligence collection.
I have a quick question. How does this affect people who are trying to travel on a advanced parole?
Advanced parole?
Yeah.
Yeah, so since the ban doesn't apply, people on advanced parole can still be paroled back into the United States as long as they have a valid passport and as long as that advanced parole was approved before they left the United States. So they can still be, it's not, when you're a parole, you haven't really been admitted, but you're a parolee, so, but at any rate, the executive order does not affect people with advanced parole. You can still re-enter with advanced parole as long as you have the valid passport as well.
Hi, my name is Rais. I'm actually traveling to Jordan on a business trip, which is starting, in fact, in a week from now. And I'm a non-immigrant on a business L1 visa. So I do have the option to cancel my business travel, but we've been working on it for quite some time. So I'm thinking whether, what would be your recommendation to not to travel right now? And the second question is, if I have to fill the G28, where can I find it before I start my travel? Because I'm traveling on Monday morning to another location before I start for Jordan.
Say the last part again?
The G28, is it available online where I can fill?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's on the USCIS website,
Okay.
uscis.gov. There's a form section and the G28 is there.
Okay.
It's usually an attorney who's going to fill that out.
Okay, but I'm traveling on Monday morning, so if I have to give it to an attorney before I start on Monday,
Yeah.
how can I do that?
Okay, so it can be it's a PDF document you can download off the USCIS website. But with respect to your first question was you're on L1, which is a non-immigrant visa. It's for multinational managers or executives or people with specialized knowledge, and you're planning on going to Jordan, which is not one of the 7 countries, but under your hypothetical, are you a citizen of one of the 7 countries? No. Okay. So, anyways, since the ban doesn't apply, you can still come back to the United States as long as you have a valid visa that's digitally imprinted into your passport, an L1 visa. But you just have to be mentally prepared that you'll likely have to go through secondary inspection upon your arrival. But you should still be readmitted to the United States, just as if it was the normal status quo. Do you have a valid visa right now, a valid L1 visa in your passport? You do? Okay, good. So you don't have to go for stamping. So, but your question was, should I travel? It's just going to be, at this point, it's just discretionary. It's advisable not to, but if you do travel, it's just going to be at your own discretion. So it's going to be a personal decision. Stella, do you want to add anything to that?
No.
Okay.
Jazakallahu khairan, brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Dhabit Wahdatiyar. I'm from Afghanistan. I have Afghani and US citizenship. Each time when I travel from here to Afghanistan, wallahi, I was checked with my entire family 3 times. And I used to travel with the Western dress. This time, I'm thinking about to have a big turban, inshallah, honestly I'm talking, to change. And Afghani dress 100%. Not only here in Dubai, Qatar, Paris. Paris, I was almost losing the flight. They stopped me for 3 hours. They checked my clothes with the lab, those things, in you name it.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And this long story, I'm sorry to talk. I bought a prepaid telephone card. I had to call from there to somebody to pick us up from, with my 8 kids and my wife, myself, from the airport, Dallas. And the police was saying, you cannot call, you missing the flight almost, you have just 2 minutes, you cannot talk. I said, I paid $10 for this card. What I should do with this? I cannot use it in America. He says, no, you cannot do that. I said, then take this one, give me my $10. He said, how come I gave you $10? I said, because you stopped me. You have the power, you stopped me here, now you have a power to stop the flight for me to delay. Wallahi, finally he took me to the store. Not everywhere the customer service is like in America. The gentleman denied to give me my $10. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put them in a fight, both. The storeman and the police. Finally, he took my $10 and I come back. I had a Quran, small, with the 30 juzzes. He was trying at the final destination when I was getting to the airplane, says, I want to check this. I said, well, this is my holy book. You cannot touch it unless you are pure. There has a condition, have to be either shower, wudu. I explained it. He says, no. I said, no, because I was mad. He says, oh, then how can I check it? I said, I will show you separately each one. Alhamdulillah, I did, and then they let me. That's one. The other thing is about these social media. Even if I delete it, still will be popping up. What is your recommendation? What I should do next time? Inshallah, I'm planning to travel. That's poor country. And by the way, my home is about 35 miles from Tora Bora. Assalamu alaikum.
So, if I understand correctly, the question is, the actual question is, what do I do with my social media? Because even if I delete it, it will pop up. I mean, you're a U.S. citizen, so you cannot be excluded from entry into the United States because of your religious beliefs or your political opinions, and it sounds like you're very well aware of that. You know, I would do exactly what you're doing, it seems like, at every stage, is invoking your rights. And when the questioning leads to matters that are outside your admissibility or your identity or your status as a U.S. citizen, then you invoke your right to an attorney. Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the U.S. citizen traveling for Umrah, and does he need to sign a G28 form before leaving for Umrah?
It's less important for a U.S. citizen. You can, in an abundance of caution, but it's less important for a U.S. citizen. If you're a U.S. citizen, then you'll likely be readmitted in the United States. In very rare situations would you not be. So.
What about the legal rights at the port of entry? Like if they ask to sign some documentation, or they ask for, just you mentioned in your slideshow that they ask for the password of the cell phones, you know, contacts of the social media.
Yeah, well,
so
you definitely do not want to sign anything unless you're in the presence of your attorney. So if they try and encourage you to sign something, whatever document it may be, you don't do that. You refuse to do that, and you would only do that in the presence of your attorney.
And we have full right to refuse it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I wanted to ask that if someone is here in the U.S. on a non-immigrant status and they are eligible to change their status to and get maybe a green card, would this be a good time to do it, or should they wait until the dust settles down and then apply for change of status?
No, I mean, if you can adjust your status to permanent residency, then there's no point in waiting. Now would be just as good a time as any to file for permanent residency if that option is available to you. So I would not encourage you to delay that in any way. What do you think, Stella?
I agree.
Yeah.
If I understood correct, there are some airports that are hostile in the manner of enforcement. Is it possible to find a list of airports that are hostile in such a way versus airports that are not?
It's a good question. I think if you can avoid, I think if you can avoid DFW, avoid it like the plague.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I think any airport in Texas, quite honestly.
Yeah. I think, based on the most recent ruling out of Washington, if you can try and go to the Seattle airport, I think they're the one, the Seattle airport I think is going to be more welcoming. I can't think of any other ones, but.
I think Boston I don't know what the general environment of CBP is like in Boston, but Boston as compared to the state of Washington is not going to be as desirable because that temporary restraining order has lapsed. The time for it has ended. But I think the only airport that sticks out right now, at least in the light of the current litigation, would be Seattle. But I will say any airport in Texas is probably something that should be avoided.
Yeah.
Any port of entry in Texas. So in JFK, they were having issues, I know, when the litigation first came down of CBP failing to comply, and Dulles as well. Actually, Dulles was a place where they were failing to comply with the court order that attorneys have access to their clients. So I don't know what the current situation is right now, but I know in Dulles, I would avoid Dulles, but I don't know what the current situation is in New York. And again, we're mentioning Seattle only because that is the jurisdiction where the lawsuit was filed, but as we explained earlier, the stay that was issued preventing the application of the order applies nationwide. But we're talking about the practical reality of getting through CBP and saying, well, even if it didn't apply nationwide, that your court and your jurisdiction has said it's not applicable. Because you're always going to have people who don't know the law. And you have to know the law better than they do, so when you're protecting your rights at the border. So think of it as an educational opportunity. You can teach some people the law.
I have a two-pronged question. If you are a U.S. citizen and you are ended up getting detained, and they ask for your phone, so how would you contact the attorney?
They have to provide a means for you to contact your attorney. When you say, I want to call my attorney, they have to permit you to call your attorney.
Okay. And have you heard anything about domestically flying? Are they doing the profiling or asking questions to especially Muslims?
Sorry.
Domestically they are flying within U.S.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, it is. There are questions that are happening on domestic flights as well.
So what we are supposed to do we need to carry our passport with us, or?
No, you don't need to have your passport with you when you're flying domestically.
You only need government issued ID, photo ID, to be able to prove what your identity is. But you don't have to prove your immigration status when you're flying domestically. Although there are, I think it would be prudent to be able to have evidence of your immigration status, but it's not required when you're flying domestically, unless of course you get asked by a CBP officer to prove your immigration status, because that does happen from time to time. At certain airports that are closer to the border, there are CBP officers there who do ask questions randomly to people who are in line. So at that point in time, you may be expected to present evidence of your lawful status in the United States, but generally speaking, that's not required. That's certainly not required in order to board a domestic flight.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I have a question about the phones. Like, I know that they would ask for your phone password. I heard from many places that you don't have to give the password. Also, I've heard that if you do give them your password, they'll pretty much download data that spy on pretty much all you're doing.
Yes, if you give them your password, they can copy all the files that are on your phone. If you deny your password, you're entitled to do that as a U.S. citizen. You are absolutely able to say, no, I'm not going to give it to you, but then you will be, you just have to be prepared to be forced to wait for a much longer time.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Is there any legal description of this profiling that they are doing? As you mentioned that somebody has a long beard or a hijab. So is there any legal description of what they are looking for? Because if you have 500 Facebook friends you don't know everything about them, and they are posting stuff on, it's on your page. So what is your recommendation regarding the Muslims living in United States about the use of social media and even use of phone? You have friends in different countries, they call you. So is there any recommendation that you can make to, avoid this all hassle that may come because of the social media and phone use?
Well, I'll be really honest. If you're engaging in the simple practice of your religion and you hold even unpopular views, they're constitutionally protected. So I won't even for a moment suggest to people that because of this increased scrutiny, you have to be more careful about, you have to adjust your belief system, or you have to censor yourself from saying things that are not incitements to violence. I will say, when you're at the border, you want to get through quickly and you don't want CBP to get all in your stuff, be prudent about it. But I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't give advice to the effect of you need to mute who you are, or you need to hide your beliefs, your genuinely held religious beliefs, or your even potentially unpopular political opinions. The truth is that this is rooted not in any indicators that would reflect who is more likely to commit violence. The factors that they're looking at are irrelevant, and they're often on constitutionally protected grounds. I mean, the vast majority of these people who are committing these so-called terrorist attacks, where they're swearing allegiance to both ISIS and Hezbollah, or where they're never practiced the religion, smoked a ton of marijuana, and then decided that they were a jihadist, well, almost all of them have in common is they beat their wives. But that's not considered a factor when the FBI is looking at who's a potential radical. So, I don't know, that's my opinion. Sonny, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I just think that whenever you post something on social media, you shouldn't have any expectation of privacy. You should simply assume that whatever you're posting on social media is going to be memorialized forever, and you should just be cognizant of that.
Yeah, I would agree with that too.
And just one additional, on that point, I remember Charles had given everybody advice that don't accept friend requests of people that you don't know, because you don't know what they're doing. So, I don't know what you think.
I think that's a good rule of thumb.
I think it's generally a good rule of thumb.
So, if you have people you don't know on yourself, just
I don't
delete
accept friend requests from people I do know.
They do not, there's no legal kind of description of what they're looking for.
No, they're looking for people who supposedly, I mean, when they're investigating crimes, they're looking for a person who's going to commit an act of terrorism. That's it. They're not going to articulate any sort of religious qualities and put that on the record, because that would be obviously unconstitutional.
It is 4 o'clock. Do you mind going over a little bit more? Is that
Yeah,
okay
we
with
could
you
do,
both?
can we do like 5 more minutes?
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Well, there are some stories that President Trump is trying to undo some of the immigration orders by previous President Obama. So do you see any risk to programs like H-4EAD, I-140EAD, considering the environment at the moment? If yes, will it go through a rulemaking process, or can it be done through an executive order?
Okay, so with respect to H-4EAD, I think that it's certainly possible that President Trump could affect that program. Whether he, I mean, you probably know that there are some leaked memos that discuss that. Whether or not those leaked memos are authentic, I think we're just going to have to wait and see. But to answer your question, I think that President Trump could affect the H-4EAD rules. We don't know yet. We'll just have to wait and see. I think it would be really a poor decision to do that. Statistics show that for every skilled worker, foreign national that's placed in the workforce, that creates at least 3 to 4 jobs for U.S. workers. So to affect the H-4EAD rules, I think would be detrimental to the U.S. economy. But at any rate, I think it is possible, and we'll just have to kind of wait and see on that. Rulemaking, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
I'm a U.S. citizen. I have been held for secondary investigation 3 times so far. say, as a matter of fact, like when you're traveling, when you're coming back on the weekend, like say it's Friday evening or long weekend, and they held you again, and you are feeling uncomfortable answering all the questions what they're asking you. So I would like to contact the lawyer, and I don't really expect the lawyer to be contacted for next 2-3 days because long weekend or whatever. So are they going to detain that candidate for such a long time till the lawyer comes for the rescue or for answering them?
Okay, is this in the case of a U.S. citizen?
Yes.
Okay. So in your hypothetical, they're asking questions that don't relate to your U.S. citizenship? That do not relate to your U.S. citizenship? No? Okay. All right. Well, you want me to?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, the first thing I can tell you is that they're not going to detain you unless you've actually committed a crime. So they don't have the legal right to detain you. If they did detain you, then an attorney can file a habeas petition, and those can be even filed on the weekends as well. You would have access to an attorney on the weekend as well. So like even this past weekend, I mean, there were plenty of people ultimately who did get access to attorneys on the weekends. But your situation, I think, is very unique, unlikely. I think there's a remote likelihood of that actually happening.
What I would suggest is that, however, if this is a really common occurrence, every time you travel, you're subjected to secondary inspection, and at some point you would like to be prepared to invoke your right to an attorney when the questioning goes beyond the bounds, whereas normally you sort of allow them to do that, is to just contact an attorney before you leave and make them aware of when you'll be back. And if after 2 hours of secondary inspection you're still there, that you will be giving him or her a call.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
One thing you mentioned that the stay is temporary, and I don't know what is the end date of the temporary stay, and what is the next we expect that how the Trump would go against or get it reinstated or remove the temporary stay. Nothing talked about it. Can you please explain?
Yeah, so what's going to happen is that the Justice Department is going to probably likely file a stay, and then it's going to be appealed to a higher court. Until that time, nothing's going to happen with the ban I suspect until the Supreme Court makes the final decision.
Particularly because of the Seattle case cannot be mooted out.
Assalamu alaikum.
That I don't know.
I mean, I think it could take up to a year at least, because it takes time to get up to the Supreme Court. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, Salam.
Welcome, Salam.
Do we have a list of numbers for the lawyers where we have to contact?
Can you say it again? A little bit louder?
Phone numbers for the lawyers where we have to contact when we're being detained in the
So I can tell you that, so you're asking about phone
place where we can reach out on the internet.
Yeah, so you're asking about phone numbers for lawyers. So I can tell you at CLCMA, we are available to provide consultation to people, Muslims whose constitutional rights are being violated. So if there is a case like that where your constitutional rights as a citizen or to be free from search and seizure without probable cause are occurring and you believe it's based on your religion, you can certainly call us. Our website is clcma.org. We don't do general immigration, so if you have a relative that you want to petition for or you want to apply for a work visa, we don't do those cases. We do cases where we feel that somebody's being discriminated against by the government.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Okay, you said that there is secondary screening. So do they pick these people ahead of time or just in random sampling on the airport?
I think it can be both. If you're on the terrorist watch list, you'll almost always be sent to secondary screening, but maybe you have a person at the initial screening that feels that something is amiss and wants it to be further investigated. It can be both.
So if they make the list ahead of time, so first they're looking for the category or the characteristics. First they're looking for that, they make the list. Like I'm always there, so I'm just wondering what I'm doing.
You're always in secondary inspection?
Yeah.
Well, it's possible that you're on the terrorism screening database. You may be connected to somebody somewhere somehow who has been under investigation. You may have gone to a mosque that was being surveilled. You may you may have a name similar to another person who may have those characteristics. The problem with the TSDB is that we don't know how you get nominated and we have no process to get you off. Yeah.
Do you want to take any more? Or?
I think we can close it out.
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. You got the last question here.
Yeah. I'm a permanent resident from with Indian passport. From last 3 years, I travel regularly to Canada on a work related. I usually travel every month. So usually, like I used to get into the secondary screening 60% of the time. Then I got into the NEXUS in the last 2 years. It's running very smooth. I don't have to go to the kiosk and get fingerprinted and come out. Will it change moving forward? And the second part of that question is like, if I get stopped in Canada because immigration happens there when I'm coming to US, so how do I contact a lawyer or what is the process?
Okay. Yeah, I don't anticipate. I haven't heard anything that program is going to change. But in terms of the ability to contact an attorney, you generally want to try and contact an attorney before you leave. If you haven't contacted an attorney before you leave, then if you invoke your right, like say for example you were to be detained, if you invoke your right to an attorney and they detain you, the government does have an obligation to provide a list of attorneys. This is what they typically do. They have a standard list of attorneys. A lot of them are from nonprofit organizations. You don't have to only call those attorneys, but you do have the right. You can hire a private attorney, but you know, depending on where you get detained, you probably want to hire local counsel because that local counsel is going to have certain relationships with the DHS officers and Department of Homeland Security and the ICE attorneys. So hiring local counsel is usually to your advantage. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Yeah, Junaid, you want to say something?
Any last comments from both of you?
Okay. Well, you know, one thing that I would say is that if you're a permanent resident and you have not applied for U.S. citizenship, for whatever reason, whatever that reason may be that you have not applied for U.S. citizenship, I mean, I would strongly encourage you to apply for U.S. citizenship. There are several factors in terms of eligibility for U.S. citizenship, including your presence, whether you meet the continuous and physical presence requirements. There's a language requirement. You have to have an elementary understanding of the English language, although there are exceptions to the language requirement, good moral character and things like that. But I would strongly encourage you, if you're not a U.S. citizen and you have the option to apply for U.S. citizenship, you should apply. Do you want to add anything, Salah, to that? Anyways, so thank you all for being patient. Thank you all for coming. And if you guys have any other questions, I mean, we can take them individually. Yeah.
Jazakumullah khairan to Sani and Sadla for your time. This is thousands and thousands of dollars worth of advice that we're getting for free in a matter of 2 hours. Alhamdulillah, subhanallah.
We'll invoice Epic.
Check my balance if you don't have a good fundraiser coming up, inshallah.
All right.
So alhamdulillah, them and all the other attorneys, please keep them in your prayers. That they've done an amazing job this past week. There's a war room at DFW Airport, at the Hyatt Hotel. They spent hours and hours and hours pro bono working for the better cause. And working
it's exhausting.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And to be clear, that wasn't us. We weren't at the airport. We were coordinating with people at the airport and sending lawyers there, but it wasn't.
But the coordination was exhausting. The
He was there. I know that for sure.
Yeah,
I saw pictures. Alhamdulillah, Stani was there. So again, please keep everybody in your dua. Let's also keep all the people who are coming in, and let's make hope for. Hopefully, Allah gives hidayah to this administration, and we just have to be prepared for the next 4 years to be a rough ride. So I think that is something that we need to. But I do want to reiterate: let's exercise precaution as much as we can. I think that's something that was an overwhelming theme that they had mentioned, inshallah. So again, Asr is at 4:30, so we can stay in Salah. Inshallah, we ask Allah to help us and guide us all, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. Oh, sorry. Can everybody help with the chairs? On the sisters, if you can just put them up against the wall on that side, and the brothers on this side, inshallah. That'd be great. Okay. Okay. Anybody who wants Sunny's business card, please feel free to take it. And if you want him to be your attorney for immigration, he's awesome. Inshallah. Okay, guys. Do you want that private room? Do you want that room, or do you want? Okay. So if anybody has any personal questions, Sunny has offered for how long? Okay, so we're gonna pray at 4:30 until 5 o'clock. You can meet in the conference room, Epic conference room, for individual questions. He's doing this as a favor, but he doesn't have his business card. But the law firm's name is Azhar and Azhar. So anybody wants to go there, inshallah, they're more than welcome to go there, inshallah. We can start now if you want. Okay, President, can you take him to the conference room, inshallah? So he'll take one at a time, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Business card? No, like in the name of the company. And what it is exactly? See his picture and his brother's picture. For anybody who wants to note down the number for CLCMA, everybody knows their site, but azharlawfirm.com, and the phone number is 214-420-1200. It's 214-420-1200. And the other website was clcma.org. clcma.org. Asr is at 4:30, inshallah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح hayya alal falah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.